What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Hills Are Silent podcast. I'm Two-Tone the Artist.
And I'm at the beach.
Here at this podcast, we like to chop it up about the games of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I got a hole in my sock. I'm ready to talk. Let's do it, guys. All right, Mitch, I know we normally start with what we've been playing recently, but I think we kind of decided just to switch it up this episode. So you shared a very good, well, good is not the way I would put it. You shared an interesting article with me about a sad situation. Now, man, GameStop, they've been the punching bag for just about every media outlet. And typically I don't like covering stuff that's been beaten to death, but this one jumped out at me. So an entire GameStop store quit on the day Zelda Tears of the Kingdom released. Now, apparently, when customers approached this store, the store was not open like it normally would during that time of the day, and there was a letter posted on the door which said the following: "Unfortunately, due to poor working conditions, the staff of the Brighton GameStop have decided to resign, effective immediately. Management overworks, underpays, and underappreciates its frontline workers, sets unrealistic expectations, and constantly threatens termination for any employee that cannot exceed them. To all of our loyal guests, we are terribly sorry for this inconvenience. We appreciate every one of you and your continued business, but I literally cannot pay my rent. If you have any questions, comments, complaints, please forward them to regional manager," I'm going to leave the name out, "and district manager," I'm going to leave the name out. And then they provide those two people's emails, basically putting them on blast. But yeah, this is not the first story about an entire GameStop store quitting. So I've got plenty of thoughts on this, but Mitch, how did you feel when you saw this article? Have you been to a GameStop lately? And if so, what's been the vibe there? What's been your experience? What are you thinking?
Yeah, initial thoughts is I know they kind of forwarded it on to the regional manager, but I think this problem stems even higher up than just the regional manager themselves. I think they're kind of also under the same, the same unfortunate circumstances that even the employees at these stores are under, and the managers that manage these stores themselves. But I have been to a GameStop fairly recently here in the city of Chicago, and you can just tell there's a different vibe there from when we were a lot younger. Because I feel like, I know we've talked about this on a separate pod, but like when you walk into a GameStop when we were, in high school or even middle school, like you really like respected the employees that worked there, and you could really see that they had like a passion for video games and what they were doing. And you almost like always like you're almost like you felt like you were friends with them when you would walk in, because they always seemed so knowledgeable, so inviting. And while they would try to sell you a Game Informer magazine, they would still be like super helpful and passionate. But I guess recently, every time I go into GameStop, it just seems lifeless to me. I feel like the people don't really care as much. And I mean, I'm sure it stems from a lot of what we just talked about with, the unfair wages and, being overworked. I mean, it's hard to have a positive attitude, when you're getting overworked and underpaid. I mean, that happens everywhere. So, yeah, I think, I knew people that worked at GameStop back in the day, and they loved their job there, but yeah, I think it's a little more lifeless now, and I think these are some of the reasons why.
Yeah, so there's a related article that I also kind of wanted to go over that touches on some of the working conditions, some of the things we're talking about. So, shockingly, GameStop had a profitable quarter. And with its most recent quarterly earning reports, they reported a $48.2 million profit, which, according to this article, is a huge shift from their $147.5 million in losses reported just the year prior. So that is a huge turnaround. But the article goes on to say that some of this is due to increased sales of collectibles and other things they're selling beyond video games, but the majority of it is due to their extreme cost cutting. And that's reducing headcount, so less employees per store, and just squeezing as much as they can get out of the employees they do have, which is leading to these protests and people walking out and quitting. So another thing that's interesting is it mentioned that some store managers are now in charge of 2 stores instead of just 1. And a lot of employees are working single shifts. And by that, I mean there's just one person at the store at a time. And I see this at the GameStop by my house. Every time I walk in, or at least the majority of the time, it's just one person working there. And this article mentions how these employees are struggling just to go to the bathroom or take a lunch break when they're the only ones there. And let's see here. Where's the part I was looking for? I'm struggling to find it. Yeah, and this is another thing I like that it points out. So, well, there's also the fear of being robbed. There was a huge slew of GameStop robberies going on recently. And also, there's just weird customers that come in. There's demanding customers that come in. So when I walk into my GameStop and there's only one guy working there, yeah, as soon as like 3 customers come in, they're already overwhelmed. Because they still got people calling, asking, you got a PlayStation 5 in stock? You got this game in stock? How much do you give for an Xbox 360? Yeah. Like, just the dumbest stuff. And people being like, and the store employees like, yeah, we don't take those anymore. Like, stop calling. Or if they tell them, like, yeah, we'll give you $25 for a PlayStation 4, they got to stay on the line and be polite while the person cusses them out. And there's all kinds of weird people that have come in the GameStop while I've been in there. Yeah, like really weird people. And it's true, man. They're like super vulnerable in there. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're in a giant store full of expensive electronics, and you got to... When I was in there the other day, there's a guy coming in to buy a PlayStation 5, and it was this tiny girl working there. I mean, she had to have been like late teens, early 20s. She's working here by herself. She's maybe 5'2" and 100 pounds soaking wet. And she's just casually telling this guy, like, yeah, oh yeah, we have PS5s in stock. We got about 50 in the back right now. I'm like, I wouldn't just go telling anybody that, man, especially with all these GameStop robberies. Like, nah. Anyway, so yeah, and it sucks. I've been in there before, and I had a guy who was about to have a mental breakdown when I was trying to buy some games. And then he literally was like, I was asking him, something was not ringing up as the price they had advertised online. And there was a whole bunch of people behind me. The line was getting longer. But I'm sorry, man. Like, he was trying to, like, tell me, like, I can't change the price right now. I can't change the price right now. Like, I get it, man. I've worked in retail. It's horrible. But honestly, dude, give it to me for the price you guys are advertising. Like, it's not ringing up correct. So when I pushed on him a little bit, he was like, man, fine, whatever, man. Screw this job. I'm going to quit tomorrow anyway. Like, he was candid about it. But yeah, it's tough. And as I mentioned, I've worked retail, and you never want to work in a store by yourself. It is scary. And I've worked in retail where we had been robbed several times. And it's bad enough when you got 2 people there, both one person there. You don't want to be cornered with a gun to your head. So just for people's safety, GameStop should not be having people work by themselves. And they need to take that seriously, and they should be legally liable for their employees' safety. Anyway, yeah, they got all kinds of crazy, unrealistic sales expectations, which these articles mention. And it's true. Like, I can never just go in there and buy a game. They're always like, do you want the warranty? Do you want a pre-order? Like, you sure you don't want to buy a console? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you need a controller?
Do you want the pro membership?
Yeah, you want the pro member. I'm like, dude, just take my money and give me the game. Like, I'm trying to get out of here. I got stuff to do. It's ridiculous. And yeah, it's just, man, it's just no fun to go in there. You can't just sit there and chop it up with the employee anymore about how awesome video games are. They're burnt out. They don't even want to talk to you. They don't want to be there. It's just not like a positive gamer environment, and it's completely.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That just kind of goes back to like when I was growing up and GameStop was first, getting introduced more and more around, Peoria area or elsewhere. Like, we respected these employees a lot. It really seemed like then these employees were really, they were juiced, they were energized. There was always more than one. I had never been in the store where there'd only be one person there. And while they were still, had the sales expectations of selling those pro memberships or whatever the heck, it never felt that they were like, that it was a must that they needed to do it, or that they had these unrealistic expectations from their higher management. They genuinely seemed like they loved being there and working this job, even if it was just something they were doing, part-time and whatnot. So yeah, it's really sad to see, honestly, because it is nice to go in and chop it up with, an employee who is interested in video games and probably has a lot of knowledge with the subject.
Yeah. And it's also just, and like you mentioned earlier, like, it's not necessarily the regional manager's fault. It's not necessarily the district manager's fault, because yeah, the pressure comes from the top to the bottom, and the lower you are on the totem pole, the harder that pressure is going to be.
Yep. And
it's just, and even this article mentions that the CEO of GameStop made $16.8 million in 2021. Now, I don't know how accurate that is or where they got this number from, but to know that they are squeezing employees as much as they can, paying them as little as possible, and overworking them as much as possible to try to cut cost, but yet their CEO is raking in $16.8 million. I mean, good for him. But, the cost cutting always starts at the people on the front line. And it's just sad to say. And that's just a trend in America. That's a trend in all retail. I worked retail, and I'll tell you, my heart goes out to anybody that's working in retail today. I did it for years. It was brutal. Like, you don't think it's that bad until you do it. And then, especially if it's for like some big corporation like GameStop or wherever it is, it is extremely profit driven. They typically do not care at all about the employees. And it's sad. And it's sad that GameStop even got to this point. I'm sure it's a series of bad decisions over the years where they held profits above everything else. And that's why, it's just not fun to go into a GameStop anymore. I'll go in there occasionally if they got a nice clearance deal, but that's about it. I never trade games in there, haven't done so in decades. And but I'd much rather go to like the mom and pop video game stores. It's much more fun, better vibe, better atmosphere. I'd much rather give my money to them.
Yeah, I just recently I was looking around the Chicagoland area. I just moved, obviously, like we've talked about, and I was looking for a local game store that was close to me and found one. And some of the nicest people in there. They're constantly checking in on me, seeing what, you need anything, you got any questions? Like, and a really way better experience than any time I've been in a GameStop. And I had another thought, but I'll keep thinking. But honestly, like, I use a lot of the online stuff more on GameStop than anything these days. I mean, I don't want to step in a store, but sometimes they do have good sales and good deals and whatnot and stuff that I can take advantage of, but I don't want to step foot in that store. So I'll just do, I'll go on the online, and it's just an easier process because I don't have to deal with only one person being in the store and having to wait in line forever and having to deal with someone who obviously does not want to be there and is very overwhelmed. Like, I mean, it's not a good experience for the people working there. It's not a good experience for the people that are coming in and trying to, purchase consoles. Like, I can't even imagine what their Christmas season is like. Like, I feel like there's just no way that they are having a good time there, especially during holiday season.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not all bad. There are, like you said, just some very small, good qualities of GameStop that still exist. And they do have good deals. Same situation. Sometimes they have good deals online, buy one get one free, buy two get one free, or whatever it is. Like, yeah, if you monitor GameStop, you can get some good deals on some stuff. But yeah, it's just.
But it's the employees that we really do feel for, because you can tell that it shows that that they're just not cared for enough at this point.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I had on that topic. Anything else you wanted to cover on it?
Nope, I think we covered everything. I'm glad we added that in. I think it was important to discuss. I mean, we both have good memories of going to our game stores, even Game Crazy that we've talked about many times, which operated very similar to a GameStop at that point. And we respect these people that work at these retail locations and just wish them the best.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, switching back over to our normal programming, what we've been playing lately. And Mitch, you and I jumped back in to another co-op game.
We did.
And this is one I've had in my Steam library for quite a while, and I've been meaning to play. I played the early access beta before this game was released, and this is Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. Now, I've been playing Tom Clancy Ghost Recon games. I've been playing Ghost Recon games since the very first one. I played the first one on Xbox, played it briefly on PC. It's definitely much better on PC, but Xbox was where I was first exposed to it. Played Ghost Recon 2 on the original Xbox. Started losing interest during the Advanced Warfare when that was released. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, I'm looking at the full list.
Ghost Recon. I think it was Advanced Warfare.
Let's see. Yep, Advanced Warfighter.
Or Warfighter. I was gonna say, I'm like, isn't there a Call of Duty that's Advanced Warfare?
Yes,
I doubt.
Call of Duty that's Advanced Warfare.
I doubted they had the exact same names. That's why I was second guessing myself. Okay, so yeah, so I kind of fell off at that point because I think some better games were coming out. Then yeah, I think that was it. No. There's Ghost Recon Future Soldier. Or Future Soldiers, whichever. It's
called Future Soldier, and that was the last one that I played before we just started playing Wildlands.
And that one was good. I beat that one.
I liked that one. Yeah.
So since I liked Future Soldier, I was very hyped for Wildlands. And yeah, we've been playing it. It's a third-person shooter, which the series has jumped from first to third, back to first, and back to third on several occasions. In my opinion, it's your typical open world game that you'd expect from Ubisoft. I mean, all these games anymore coming out of Ubisoft kind of play the same. They're just like reskins of each other, I guess to say. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're still fun games.
That was the first thing that we said to each other when we just started diving in. We're like, man, this just feels like, the Watch Dogs or the Divisions of the world that Ubisoft also has.
Yeah. But I've been enjoying it. The guns are cool. The missions are cool. Yeah, we'll see. We were only a couple hours in. What were your thoughts on it, Mitch?
Yeah, I liked jumping into just I liked how sometimes open world games can be a little overwhelming with how much they kind of give you to do side quest wise and main quest wise, but I really liked how it looked, and it was a beautiful atmosphere when they jump you right in. Hoping the story's a little interesting. I know some of these open world games, especially the Ghost Recons, are never super interesting, but hoping it started out pretty strong as far as the story's concerned. I want to point out, I'm glad we played at a higher difficulty. I think I told you this a couple times while we were playing, because I feel like if on those lower difficulties, it can be really easy to take away from what makes the game fun, and you could just literally just breeze through and take down all these enemies in this outpost and go and capture the guy that you're supposed to capture or interrogate and not have any issue, and you don't have to do any stealth stuff or anything. But for us, since we played in a higher difficulty, we really did have to strategize on what we wanted to do before we went into this outpost, because we were dying in a couple hits and we're boom done.
Yeah, and also Ghost Recon historically has been known as a difficult game. a lot of these Tom Clancy games, the early versions of them were extremely difficult. Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon, even Splinter Cell to a degree. It's just like you would go in and you had to. They were military strategy games, and like even with the original Rainbow Six, you had to plan your whole how you're going to play the level like before the game even started, your whole route. And in that game and the original Ghost Recon, it only took a few hits for you to die. Sometimes just one. Sometimes the enemy, if they got you in a headshot, you were dead. And my buddy and I recently tried to play through Tom Clancy Advanced Warfighter 2 in co-op on PlayStation 3. And you die so fast in that game, we couldn't even get past the first level. Again, this is the same buddy that I was playing the Red Star with, and again, we had some beers in us, so that may have had something to do with it, but typically we're not that bad at video games, even after a couple of beers. But yeah, it was brutal. So when Future Soldier came out, they basically tried to broaden the appeal and make it an easier game, more run and gun, less strategy. And I think they tried to do the same thing with Ghost Recon Wildlands. So yeah, so it only makes sense to me to play it at a higher difficulty to kind of keep that spirit of Ghost Recon where you have to infiltrate and think about it your every move. And one thing that I thought was interesting is that even though it's the same map every time, it seems that small things change. Because you and I, we tried to replay the same mission several times, and the first time we played it, it was this huge fortress with tall walls and barbed wire all around it. And the first time we went to play it, there was a break in the barbed wire and a box that we could jump on to sneak into the fort, so we didn't have to go in the front door. But then when we died and reloaded, all of a sudden that box and that cut in the barbed wire was no longer there. So we no longer could enter the fort from that side. So there must be some degree of randomization to how these buildings are laid out, or how you can access them at least.
That was interesting. Yeah, I do like you said, that we have to plan out our entrance in those outposts, and if they change, then we have to change our strategy. One other thing, I know we're very early into this game, but I really like the, I guess it almost feels like a Grand Theft Auto way of like grabbing vehicles or planes or whatever's at your disposal and just taking them around the map. Like, we just found a plane just on this, in this bunker or in this, outpost area, and we're like, let's take it and go. Or even some of the side quests are like, hey, you need to go steal this plane and take it to, or helicopter, and take it to our outpost over here so that we can claim this helicopter. So there was some cool stuff, and it felt really smooth when you were flying us around and doing stuff like that, and I could even shoot out of it, or even some of the vehicles, I had a gunner on it, almost like a warthog.
It plays very well. The vehicles control well. There's so much you can do. That's one thing I do like about a lot of the Ubisoft games is there's usually a lot to them. A lot of different moves you can do, different ways. Like you can aim, or you can zoom in even farther. Like there's different ways you can just aiming your gun, all the gadgets you have. The type of open world game I like is these toy box open world games. And I know I've mentioned this on an earlier episode, but basically where they just drop you in a world and give you a ton of cool toys and cool stuff to play with. Like, don't hide it behind some complicated unlock tree. Like, yeah, you can have other weapons and items you can unlock, but yeah, from the get-go, just give me a whole plethora of cool toys that I can just explore in this world and use. And yeah, Ghost Recon Wildlands is definitely that. Another game that comes to mind is the Just Cause series, where it's just like, here's just everything cool you can imagine. Just go in and have fun and shoot and blow up whatever.
Oh yeah, that's like the Michael Bay of video games for sure. I know I talk about that with some other games, but the Just Cause series, they just want you to blow up everything you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only issue I ran into with Wildlands is we were playing on PC and I was playing with a controller. And sometimes, actually pretty frequently, the D-pad or the face buttons on the Xbox controller would get screwed up to where they would do what the D-pad would do. So it's basically like the Y button would be up on the D-pad, X would be left on the D-pad, B would be the right, and A would be down. And it would just, I don't know why, just sometimes the face buttons would register as the directional pad. And it was really frustrating and really throwing me off. And when I got on the Steam discussion forums, a lot of other people reported this bug as well. Apparently, I think you can, if you disable the controller, like controlling Steam itself, supposedly that's supposed to resolve it. So we'll see. Really, even if you buy the game through Steam, it goes through your Ubisoft account anyway. So I think the next time we play, we'll just load it up directly from the Ubisoft store and not even have Steam open to see if that fixes the issue. But
yeah,
go ahead. What are you gonna say?
I said yeah, because I didn't have the opportunity to run into that issue because I actually launched it from the Xbox Game Pass, which launched the Ubisoft site or store through that.
And I remember that night you got stuck in game launcher inception.
Oh my god.
And I was already had the game loaded up and you were trying to connect your Xbox Game Pass to your Ubisoft account, and then it was just all wonky, and I don't know what you did, but you had to fight with that whole system. And I've done the same thing because you can the Xbox Game Pass, you can also link to your EA game launcher. Same thing happened to me once. It just was just this whole mess, which they don't play nice together.
It's the most annoying thing ever, like in games. There's just, I understand why there are so many storefronts. I totally get it as far as a business aspect. But like, man, I just wish that PC could just be like, here's your PC launcher for everything. And you never have to download 6 different, there's EA Store, there's Epic Game Store, there's Steam, there's Ubisoft, there's
Amazon has their own.
There's Amazon. Like, you name it, there's one for it. And it just clogs up my computer. And half the time, my games aren't even updated because I haven't launched that store in 3 years. And
yeah,
it's just a big headache, man. But in this case, yeah, I was having a big problem with it. And my account was linked to some other account. And I had to unlink it and link it to my current Xbox account. And it was a giant mess that I finally got figured out.
Yep. And this is gonna seem strange and may make me feel a little old, but I remember a time when Steam, believe it or not, kids, Steam used to be the only game launcher on PC. Well, not the only one, but the main only one. EA did not have their own, Ubisoft did not have their own, the Epic Game Store did not exist. Steam was the only major player. And then everybody had their games on Steam. All the old Ubisoft games, all the old EA games, they went through Steam. So just like all your other Steam games, it was downloaded by Steam, it was installed by Steam, it was updated by Steam. And like you said, like sometimes if you don't open these things, your games aren't updated. It was nice back in the day when everything went through Steam, because as long as you left your Steam up, all your games were always up to date. Never had to worry about it. Everything was in one location. But then all these other companies eventually were like, hey, we need to stop giving Steam a cut of the profits to put our games on their storefront. We need our own storefront. So then they all came out with their own storefronts. And then somehow now they're back in good terms with Steam. And now they're selling them their games through Steam, but using their own launchers. And
they realized that nobody wanted to use their crappy launcher that they created because the Steam store, while it has its flaws, is the most perfect place to launch games out of all the other options.
Yeah. Long live Steam.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll keep cranking through Ghost Recon.
Yeah.
Now, that's really all I've been playing. There's a few other small things, but I'll get into them in a later episode. What else have you been playing, Mitch? Or what else have you finished lately?
Yeah, I talked last week about how I was playing a couple longer games, and I did finish one, and we're going to go into kind of a big discussion as a whole with this series because I am playing the fifth installment of it, and this game is called in series is called Yakuza, and I just finished Yakuza 5. And for those who want to get into the Yakuza series, I don't really want to go into, the story and whatnot of 5 itself because it's really not going to make any sense. They do all kind of go on top of each other, and the stories are built out from, the first Yakuza to, the last. So in this case, I will say a little bit about 5 just as a at a broad stance. It's developed by Ryuga Gotoku Studio, and they develop all the Yakuza games. And I'm playing it via Xbox Game Pass, which is great. They actually have Yakuza Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, 0, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, all on Game Pass, which has been amazing for me that as somebody who only owned Yakuza 0 on PS4 prior to getting into the series, it was nice that I could just go and dive in through Game Pass the rest of the series. And so the past few years, I've been churning through this series, and I've made it through Yakuza 5. So now I have 2 left in so far, or at least until they release another one in the main series of Yakuza Like a Dragon games.
Wait, which ones have you beaten again?
I've beaten 0, 1, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, Yakuza 3, Yakuza 4, Yakuza 5.
Okay.
And there's still, that I haven't beat, Yakuza 6, Yakuza 7, or Like a Dragon 7. And then they just came out with the spin-off that is, I can't remember the name of it.
Is it Ishin?
Yes, that one.
It's like a spin-off takes place in feudal Japan instead of modern Japan.
Yes, and they're all kind of samurais instead of Yakuza gangbangers. But before we dive into the Yakuza as a whole, with Yakuza 5, as you progress through these Yakuza games, you're typically 1, maybe 2 characters throughout them. Lately, as far as Yakuza 4 and 5, I've had to actually be 4 or 5 characters in this game through each act, which honestly I've kind of felt like is taken away from the story of it, which, like, the story in Yakuza games is really what draws me in and keeps me in, because they always throw some cool twists and turns, and there's some just ridiculous stuff that happens. And when they, like, split it up and you have to do, like, a backstory of each character that you're playing before they continue the story, it kind of, like, slows the pace down on it. So Yakuza 5, not really one of the top ones I've played by any stretch, but it was still a fun game.
How would you rank them out of the ones that you've already beaten?
So Yakuza 0 is my number 1. I absolutely adore Yakuza 0.
Question, was that the first one you played through?
It was the first one I played through as well.
So are you biased, or was it legitimately the best one out of all of them?
Maybe I am biased. I'm not sure, but it has you play half the game with my favorite character in Yakuza, in Majima. Majima is my favorite in Yakuza. He's the most ridiculous character ever. You kind of get his origin story through that, which I always wanted. Even though I didn't know I wanted it at the times, I had never played any of them. But
yeah,
as I've gone through other Yakuzas and I see Majima throughout them, it's awesome that I got to play with them for so long in that game. But yeah, 0 is my favorite. It may be biased, I'm not sure. And then I think the Kiwamis are probably, you could interchange either one or 2 are my next. So honestly, the first 3 games that I played in the series are my favorites so far. Because while the 3, 4, and 5 remasters they're remasters and they're fine, you can tell they're a little more dated than the Kiwamis that they actually are. The Kiwamis are considered remakes instead of just remasters.
Yeah. The original Yakuza 1 and 2 came out on PlayStation 2. And just to temporarily derail the discussion, so I've only beaten Yakuza Kiwami 1, and I've gotten pretty far in Kiwami 2. And yeah, Kiwami 1 was amazing. That was such a good game. That had me hooked from beginning to end. And then Kiwami 2, they changed the way the main character looks. And he went from like this rugged dude to like this cutesy anime looking guy. And I'm just like, what the heck? I could not take him seriously. Every time they showed him, he had like kitten eyes. And I'm just like,
yeah, that pissed some fans off.
It pissed me off. Sure. It just was so weird looking. It kind of had like this, what's it called? Uncanny Valley look to it, or
okay, yeah.
Anyway, but other than that, the game is good. But I did try to go back and play the original Yakuza on PlayStation 2. I had never played it when it was originally released. I remember seeing it in the Blockbuster rental store and always wondering about it. But either I just decided never to try it, or it was always out of stock there. But anyway, I tried to go back and play it. And yeah, the remakes are like beat for beat the exact same as the original games. I mean, I'm sure they added something here and there, but for the most part, you could almost put them side by side and they would go through the same story points, the same cutscenes, like everything. I like that they kept it really, really true to the original game. Because, like, for instance, with Resident Evil 2 and the Resident Evil 2 remake, even though it's a remake, they changed so much in it. So I would still encourage people to go back and play the original one, because they're still largely two completely different games. But in this case, with Yakuza Kiwami, I would say if you've played Kiwami, there is no reason to go back and play the original one. It's the same story, the same game, but better through and through. And one thing that totally killed it for me on the original PlayStation 2 game was the loading screens.
Oh God, brutal.
Yeah, because it's a semi-open world game. You have this small city you can run through, and every time you turned a corner, you had like this 30-second loading screen. So imagine running through the city, Mitch, and like every time you turned down a new street, it stopped to load. Like, it was brutal. I'm usually pretty patient with loading screens, but this one was terrible.
And that would be really unfortunate, because like in these games, kind of like other MMOs, even if you can talk about like a Final Fantasy or even like a Pokemon, for instance, like when you're running through the city of Kamurocho, I think is what they call it, and most of the games kind of reside in Kamurocho, but when you're going through, you could always run into random NPCs that are trying to fight you, and it happens a lot, and it's really hard to avoid all these people that are just randomly trying to fight you. So I can't imagine having the long loading screens only to run into somebody who's going to try and beat the crap out of me, and I have to spend more time getting through that before I can even get to a main quest or a side quest or anything like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and the random battles did kind of get on my nerves, even with the remakes. But I mean, it's tolerable. But yeah, sometimes it can get out of hand when you have to run across the map. You're like, I just want to get to the next mission, and I've got all these random battle encounters like stopping me the whole way through.
Yeah, thankfully they do have a taxi service in that game that actually can get you around the map a little easier, and you don't have to run into as many, but yeah, it can get a little annoying after a while, and I don't know where we want to take it from here. There's a lot of avenues we can go. I mean, this game is huge. Like, I mean, we talk about it as that it isn't primarily in one city, but there's so much they do branch it off into other cities at certain times in certain games, but there's so much you can do in these cities. And I think maybe now we should take it into exactly what you can do. And I want to go into the sub-stories to start.
Okay.
So while there's a main quest in all the Yakuza, or a main story in all the Yakuza games, which I am super drawn to, it's an amazing story that really hooks me in, and I can get over some of the other stuff of maybe the random battles that annoy me a little bit, or even, you know, running around the same town over and over again in different games. But the sub stories are always different, and they really take a big spin and kind of show, while Yakuza main story is super serious and is very like always trying to go over the hierarchy or overthrowing, a Yakuza structure, or, people trying to be the leaders of the Yakuza and are killing other people in the Yakuza. Very serious in the main story. But the sub-stories are ridiculous, and they just have nothing to do with the main story, but they are amazing. And I actually pulled a couple that are my favorite ones, and I kind of just want to talk about them because it really tells you how ridiculous they are. So the first one I pulled is one I actually just played in Yakuza 5, and they titled it "Be My Baby." And you're called to get rid of some thugs that are blocking business from opening. They're blocking some poor person's local business. And the leader comes out and apologizes, and then invites you inside this building. So the leader of this gang of thugs invites you inside. You go inside to this building, and it is a giant nursery, and there's one lady waiting for you. And because once he walks into this building and sees this nursery, there's a bunch of grown men in diapers that are getting essentially nursed by this one woman inside this establishment. So basically, it's just a bunch of grown men that kind of have a fetish for, being babied a bit. And so basically, by the end of that, Kiro gets so pissed off about this whole thing and beats the crap out of all of them while they're wearing diapers.
And wait, which game was this in?
This is 5.
Okay.
Yes, I played it right when I did do this sub-story very recently, and it was so ridiculous. But that just kind of goes into how ridiculous some of these sub-stories can get. And then there's one more, and I think this one is from Zero, if I'm not mistaken, and it's called Miracle on Tenkachi Street. And this one's just interesting to me. So you're thrown into a cutscene where 2 men are disguised as are discussing a pop prince called Miracle Johnson. And Miracle Johnson, just think about that MJ. And they're shooting a new music video in Camarocho. And so you're asked to go help in this music video because there are some zombie extras in this music video that are not behaving, and Kiro, the main character, needs to keep them in line. You agree to help out, and then you run into 2 very familiar-looking people. One guy, he's the director. His name is Steven Spinning, and then there's Miracle Johnson, which are the Yakuza versions of Steven Spielberg and Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And so, essentially, you're basically protecting them while they film the music video for Thriller. And it's this wannabe Michael Jackson, Steven Spielberg filming this while there's zombies in the background messing around, and Kiro's trying to keep them in line. And by the end of it, he gives you a reward, which is like, you get a black box or a white box. You pick which one you want to get, which is kind of a nod to Michael Jackson, obviously, going white at one point. But yeah, ridiculous stuff like that, where they're just super creative with their side contents, and there's many more I could go over, but a lot of their sub stories are super funny.
Yeah, and there's other ones where people are trying to scam you, or just all kinds of crazy stuff, and yeah, they get really bizarre. But it's very refreshing because, like you said, the single player the main story is like so serious. So it's nice to just run around and do these side quests that are just so ridiculous. One thing I want to circle back to.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the first 2 Yakuza games were released on PlayStation 2. Well, oddly enough, Sega reprinted the first 4 Yakuza games, including the original 2 PlayStation 2 games, in 2017. So it's strange that all of a sudden all these new copies of PlayStation 2 games were printed and sold in 2017. And it was nice because anybody that wanted to collect those original 2 games, it drove the price way down. Because at that point, they were like, I don't know, they were going up in price. They were becoming collectible, $70, $80 around there. But now that they've released an extra, I don't know, a couple thousand copies, tens of thousand copies. Who knows how many they printed up, but it's driven the price way down if you were to want to get those original games. Because I even struggled to get copies of the third and fourth game on PlayStation 3 back in the day. I mean, eventually they were remastered and re-released on PlayStation 4, which is the way to go now, but at the time they were kind of hard to come by. Anyway, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's pretty unheard of, honestly. Like a company going back and, reprinting games as far back as 2 generations of consoles ago, 3 generations at this point.
Speaking of, I haven't checked in a few years, but a few years back, probably like 2015, 2016, Square Enix was still selling new copies of Final Fantasy games on PlayStation 1. You can go to the Square Enix online store and then buy Final Fantasy games brand new for PlayStation 1, and they would sell out and then they would print another batch. I remember I was on like the email list, so they let me know every time they printed a new batch. So it does happen occasionally. There are these companies that are still selling, strangely enough, PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games are still being reprinted.
Yeah, it's got to be franchises like Square Enix where they just, they have this iconic franchise and they know if they release this, even on a limited basis, they'll sell them.
Anyway, coming back to Yakuza, in addition to all these interesting side quests, there's so much to do in these games. Because as I mentioned, they're like semi-open world. There's so many things you can get distracted with and just not even mess with the main story. You can go in all kinds of businesses and establishments. You can go in like pharmacies, grocery stores, pawn shops, and just stuff to get gear. But there's also all kinds of places you can go to just have fun. Like you can play baseball, you can go to a batting cage, you can go to places to play darts, to play golf, to play whatever it is, you name it.
Which is funny because in Yakuza 5, one of the characters who you play as is a former baseball star. And so they have a whole sub-story around him being a former baseball player and meeting up with his former people that he played baseball with. And there's this whole sub-story where you have to do an entire baseball minigame through the whole, the entire sub-story. There's multiple sections of the story. And yeah, there's a lot of fun minigames for sure.
Yeah, and there's even stuff like karaoke and almost like Guitar Hero-esque mini games and stuff you can do.
The karaoke is funny because...
Go ahead, what were you going to say?
The karaoke is funny because when you're doing it and you sign up for it and your guy starts singing, it goes into a full-fledged music video basically with your main character as the focal point of that music video. And so sometimes they're dressed in these just outrageous outfits while they're just singing along, belting the song. It's pretty funny.
Isn't there even in some of the games a whole thing where you can manage an establishment?
Sometimes it's like an establishment, but the cabaret club,
that was it,
is what you can manage. And I actually have a ton of notes down for this because this is almost like a full-fledged game in itself, which is wild. We talk about how there's so much in these Yakuza games, but this is literally a management sim in itself. So basically, they have these in multiple games of the series. There's always cabaret clubs, and a lot of the times that you, the main character, can go manage them. And when you're doing this, you're essentially recruiting hostesses to come and join your club and be a part of your establishment. You manage the hostesses' mood so that they are all refreshed and ready to meet with, the clients and customers that come in. Each hostess has abilities that you need to balance because some customers, for example, like party girls, and other customers are looking for love. So you have to manage it in that aspect of what type of hostesses do you have? You have to manage the interactions between the guests that come into the cabaret club. For example, if there's a bad interaction between hostess and customer, you have to come and there'll be some signal and you'll have to come in and maybe refill the ice or swap an ashtray or maybe escort a guest out who's misbehaving, give an apology gift if the hostess is in a bad mood or something like that, and and she's failing the interaction. So it's a whole management sim, and that's only like one very small part of the game.
That's crazy to me. And then I also remember there's like a full-fledged casino. You can go in and you can play all the different casino games. It's just like, it's just like, how do the developers have time to fit all this stuff in? These games are just massive. There's just games within games. There's the Sega arcade building that's in all the cities, and you go into it and it's like a recreation of a Sega arcade, and you can actually go in and play the arcade games in the arcade in this game. So you're playing video games within a video game. So it's just wild. And they'll have full Sega games. And I think you provided a list here.
Yeah.
Mitch. So this is an article. The best Sega arcade games featured in Yakuza games. And they've got the classic Outrun, which, man, I used to love that game. Virtua Fighter 2. It's just weird because like your character is going in these arcades, sitting down at these arcade machines, and all of a sudden you go in and you're playing these classic Sega games within these Yakuza games. Got Puyo Puyo. That one I don't think I've ever played.
I played Puyo Puyo. It's very good.
Motor Raid. Never played that one, but it looks cool. It's like some futuristic motorcycle racing game. Toilets.
Toilets.
Oh yeah, I remember playing this one. This must have been in Yakuza Kiwami 2. Interesting. I wonder if these are real. So another thing about the Yakuza games is, they're totally Japanese. They're all in Japanese. You have to read subtitles, and it's just oozing Japanese culture. And for someone like me who's never been to Japan, even though I'm sure it's not like a Yakuza game, it at least kind of gives me a glimpse into pop culture in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into the bathrooms in Yakuza Kiwami 2, there's like arcade machines above the urinals. And you can play the game with your stream of pee.
Yeah.
It's super outrageous, but I would not be surprised if this actually exists somewhere in some bathroom in Japan.
Absolutely. It's kind of like here, in Buffalo Wild Wings, it was super iconic when they added the TV in front of you when you were taking a piss at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah. I remember the first time I ever saw that TV above a urinal. I'm like, man, we are truly living in the future.
Yeah.
So see, they also have Sonic the Fighters. And this is the one that totally intrigues me. You were telling me that... So, in addition to the Yakuza games, there's a spin-off series called Judgment. And there's 2 games in that series. There's Judgment and then Lost Judgment. But apparently there's an arcade game that's playable in Judgment called Kumuro of the Dead. And it's basically like a House of the Dead knockoff. And me loving the House of the Dead, I really want to play this inside the Judgment game. And also, what kind of surprises me is, well, no, it doesn't surprise me because Sega owns the House of the Dead and they publish Yakuza. Okay. So, but yeah,
makes sense.
And you said that you played through Judgment, but you never got a chance to play this arcade game.
Yeah, I don't know where that arcade is in Judgment. I always go around and try and see as much as I can of the world when I play these Yakuza or Judgment games. And I never ran into this one, so I'm kind of upset at myself, though, because it seems awesome.
Well, the interesting thing to me is in this description, it says... Wait, hold on. I'm going to go ahead and read this description, because I didn't get a chance to read this.
I like it, so yeah, go ahead.
So here's what it says. This one's a bit of a cheat as it's not a real arcade game, nor is it the first fictional arcade game in the Yakuza series. That honor goes to sci-fi shoot 'em up Boxelios from Yakuza 3. Nonetheless, Kumuro of the Dead is a rail shooter in the style of the classic The House of the Dead series, but using the assets from NAF zombie spin-off Yakuza Dead Souls, which we'll get into in a moment. Sure, you have to play with the cursor rather than a real light gun, a technology that all but disappeared once CRT displays disappeared, which we covered not that long ago on an episode.
We sure have.
Me hunting down a CRT just so I can play some old school light gun games. But it still nails the spirit of those games as you're swamped by hordes and bosses where you're wrestling with accuracy and a shaky camera. Heck, it was enough of a hit to warrant a sequel, Hama of the Dead. That must be in...
Must be in Lost Judgment.
Yeah, it must be in Lost Judgment. Anyway, that is awesome. So, in addition to the many, many Yakuza games we named off, Yakuza 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Like a Dragon, Ishin, in addition to all those, there are many other spin-offs that we never got in the US that stayed in Japan. But even in addition to that, there was a spin-off exclusively released on the PlayStation 3, and we did get this one in the US, called Yakuza Dead Souls, which is a zombie, apocalyptic zombie spin-off game, essentially. And this is one of the few ones released in the US that was never re-released on PlayStation 4 or on PC in recent years. So it lived and died on the PlayStation 3. And at the time of its release, it got poor reviews. But that could be attributed to a few things. For one, at the time of this game's release, zombie games were just done to death. I mean, they still are, but at that point, we were basically at like full zombie game saturation where people were just kind of like getting really tired of every game having some version that has zombies in it. And the game, since the Yakuza games are not built to be third-person shooters, they basically had to rework the game engine so that it could be a third-person shooter, and really the controls are terrible. Even though this game is not that old, it does not have the modern third-person shooter controls that we all know and expect nowadays. So I've had many chances to pick this game up. I remember seeing it at GameStop every time I went there. $15. And I kept telling myself, $15 is kind of expensive for this game that doesn't even have good reviews. I'm interested in it, but I'll pick it up when it's $5. And then all of a sudden, I stopped seeing it at GameStop everywhere. And next thing you know, this game starts climbing in value. Now I start seeing it for $40. And I tell myself, if I didn't buy it for $15, I'm definitely not going to buy it for $40. And fast forward to today, you're lucky to get this game for like $75. Amazon has it listed for $120 for a used copy right now. Like it's ridiculous. It's one of the more expensive PlayStation 3 games as far as like finding a used copy. Sure. But it is still available on the PlayStation 3 store, which we all know that the PlayStation 3 network store's days are numbered. So if you want this game, snatch it up now off of that PlayStation store, unless you're willing to drop close to $100 for a physical copy, because on the store it's $15. So I recently picked up a digital copy of this game for $15, and I knew we were doing this Yakuza themed episode, so I'm like, hey, now's a better time than any to dive into Yakuza Dead Souls, see if it's as mediocre or as bad as everyone says it is. And I gotta say, I'm only a couple hours in, but it's pretty awesome. It is Yakuza with zombies and guns, and in my opinion, that's as cool as it sounds. Yes, the controls are terrible. They are terrible. So basically, as long as you're facing a zombie and you press the shoot button, your character will automatically shoot at them. And then you can also hold one of the L1 or L2, I don't remember, on the controller, and your character will lock in place so you can basically strafe left and right and still shoot in that direction. Or you can hold the other L button, which I think is L1, and a reticle will actually come up on the screen for you to aim, but you can't move while aiming. And to make matters worse, instead of aiming with the right thumbstick like in every other shooter, you aim with the left thumbstick, which just feels really unnatural. So you're holding the L1 button and aiming with the left thumbstick to aim and shoot. You can't move. Either that or you're running around and just relying on the auto aim and hoping for the best. So it's janky, but like I said, the Yakuza game engine was not designed to be a third-person shooter, so I think they probably just kind of had to hack that in. You can still pick up weapons and bash the zombies with them, and when you've killed enough zombies, you have this like sniper mode where you hit the triangle button and you'll kind of go into like some cinematic slow-mo shoot, and there's all kinds of explosives all around or other things that you can shoot, and then if you time it just right, you can either blow up a barrel that blows up a bunch of zombies or like set off some electrical power line or something to shock the zombies. There's all kinds of cool little game mechanics that you kind of expect from Yakuza, like just these like super modes or whatever. Because in the other Yakuza games, can't you go into some like power mode once you've beaten up enough people? You've got like some super gauge
you get
or something.
It's your like heat mode essentially.
Heat mode. That's exactly what I was thinking.
So for those who don't know Yakuza, I don't think we've gone too much into like exactly what it is. It's essentially like an open world fighter, basically. Like you as the Yakuza, as Kiryu, who's the main character for majority of the games, you are always using your fists or any items that you find in the city that you can pick up, and you're really just beating the shit out of people, and that's literally all the combat that's in the game.
Yeah.
But you can get into heat mode after you beat the crap out of people enough, and in heat mode you could do almost like special moves. So I know like, and they are brutal special moves, some of them. I know like there's one where if the guy's already laying down, you basically just trigger Y and it triggers that heat mode move, and he just goes and just basically curb stomps the crap out of a guy, and he is just bleeding everywhere. Like as the games go by, it gets more realistic, I've noticed, or even like the Kiwamis that are remakes, like, and it looks really gnarly when he's like throwing them against the wall and just bashing, their brains in. But then the funny thing, which there's always funny things in Yakuza, like after you're done and you win the fight, these guys just act like Kiryu basically just punched him up a few times, and they're laying down hurt, but they should be dead for some of the stuff that he does to them.
Yeah.
And he's literally doing a DDT. Like there's one where he grabs them and straight up does a DDT. It just pile drives their head into the concrete.
The fighting is great in these games. They're very, very deep fighting mechanics. The longer you go, the longer you progress, the more moves you unlock. And you typically have different fighting styles that you can switch between, like a more heavy, slow brute mode, a real fast mode, kind of like an in-between balance mode. And it's just fun switching between the different fighting styles depending on what type of enemy you're facing.
And as the games go by, that evolves into, instead of Kiryu being the one guy who has multiple fighting styles, you really switch between multiple characters throughout the story, and each specific character has their own fighting style.
But anyway, back to Dead Souls. It's pretty awesome just to see zombies in a Yakuza game. It's bloody, it's gory, you get headshots, their heads explode. There's giant boss monsters that you have to fight. And it's this weird mix, and it just, to me, it works. But I'm not that far in the game. Who knows? Maybe 10 hours in, nothing will change. It'll be real repetitive and monotonous, and maybe the bad control scheme will get the best of me. But again, I've played a lot of old games with terrible control schemes, so for me, I can adapt easily. For a modern gamer where every game pretty much has the same control scheme, you may not be able to adapt as well. But where it stands today, I recommend the game, and it still has all the good Yakuza charm. There's the weird characters, the weird side stories. And yeah, I wish it would get a remaster, because playing it on PlayStation 3 in 720p resolution, it's a little blurry, it's a little choppy, doesn't quite do it justice. I think it deserves a remaster just like all the other games, and to be more widely available. Even if it's cheap, man, like, you don't have to put a lot of work into it. Just get it out there so more people can play it.
Yeah, I'm anxious to hear more as you go through it.
Yeah, and I'm regretting not picking up that $15 physical copy because I got most of the other games in my collection. I would love to have Dead Souls in my collection as well.
I have been thinking for a while of trying to actually buy a PlayStation 3, the one that is actually just backwards compatible through, PlayStation 1 games, and kicking myself for not buying one of those farther back because those are pretty pricey now, and obviously I could play Yakuza Dead Souls on it.
Yeah. But I'll keep you posted. For now, it's pretty awesome though. It's yeah, I'm digging it.
Nice.
I would say the only gripe is I complained earlier about all the random battle encounters in the Yakuza games. Well, the zombies infinitely respawning.
Oh no.
Which I've mentioned that before. I do not like infinitely respawning enemies. Like, you can clear out a room and 10 seconds later it's filled up again, and I think eventually that's going to get on my nerves. But then again, I kind of equate it to like the Dead Rising games. I don't know if you ever played those.
Yep.
But in Dead Rising, it's just a never-ending horde of zombies. That's just part of the gameplay. And even though I wasn't a huge fan of that, I did really like the Dead Rising games.
Yeah, those are some classics. Those are other Capcom hard games where you are timed from beginning to end to beat that game.
Yeah. A couple more things to go over. Also, something else to mention is that the Yakuza series is not called Yakuza in Japan. And to my understanding, they're not going to call it Yakuza in the US Western releases either. They're changing it to Like a Dragon, which I believe is what it's called in Japan anyway.
Yep.
And one more thing, Mitch, do you want to go over what the Coliseum is in the Yakuza games?
Yeah. I was that's a pretty exciting thing. So, deep underground, they have a special area that's kind of hidden from law enforcement, and it's called Purgatory. And inside Purgatory, it has some of the things that we mentioned, like casinos that you can go and play games through and whatnot, but it also has something called the Coliseum. And the Coliseum is essentially a fighting ring that all these people come down into Purgatory to watch these people just fight against each other and bet against them. And they have some story content that eventually goes into Purgatory and goes into this Coliseum. But they also have a lot of side content that you can do. It's almost like a King of the Ring scenario. If you're familiar with the wrestling lingo there, you're basically fighting somebody different in rounds every time, and you get currency, or you get items, or even achievements for fighting all these people that they match you up against. But there are some ridiculous ones that you have to go up against as you get higher up into the Coliseum difficulty, or until you face like one of the major bosses of the Coliseum, or like the best fighter. And I'm not sure if you played any of this, Mike, but there's at one point I had to fight 2 grown tigers. It was just straight up, I'm fighting 2 tigers that they released them into the Coliseum, and it's just Kiryu punching these tigers in the mouth, trying to...
Of course, dude. These games are so outrageous. You remember which game that was in?
Oh, man. I want to say one of the Kiwamis, maybe. I'll have to look it up. I'm going to look it up right now because I'm super curious.
One more thing to circle around back to. I don't think we ever finished your rankings of the Yakuza games you beat. So you said...
No.
You said 0 is your favorite. 1 and 2.
0 is my favorite. I think 1, 2 in order. So it goes 0, 1, 2. So honestly, the first 3 games I played are pretty much my top 3.
Okay.
Then I'll go into and say 4 is my next favorite. Then 5. Then 3. 3 is the one that it's almost the oldest of all of them, because the Kiwamis are remakes and the rest are remasters, but you can tell that 3 is very outdated and it just didn't feel great compared to the other ones as far as the fighting aspect. The story was pretty good, but the fighting aspect didn't hold up as much as 4 or 5, and then Kiwami through 0. So 3 is my worst that I've played so far, and I probably will stay there because I've heard 6 is really good. And 7, we haven't even talked about it. I haven't played 7 yet, but they switched the formula completely in 7. And it's not, went away from it being just a brawler and turned it into being a turn-based RPG. So it basically is just like, like the Final Fantasies operate, those turn-based Final Fantasies where you're picking a move and you're fighting against somebody. So interesting when I get to that one.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give that one a try, but it's such a departure from the other games to go from an action fighter to a turn-based strategy game. So, yeah, I don't know how I'll feel about that one when I finally get around to playing it.
So it looks like the fighting of the tigers was in Yakuza 3, which is the one that I said was my least favorite. But
had that memorable moment.
That was a pretty memorable moment for me.
Nice, man. I think we covered our list of Yakuza topics. Any closing thoughts on that?
I could keep going. There's so much other stuff that we haven't really even touched on, but it's that's really the major aspects of all the Yakuza games. Like if you haven't played them, I highly recommend them. At least try out either. If you're going to start, you're totally fine either starting with Yakuza Kiwami 1 or Yakuza 0. Yeah. Yakuza 0 is a prequel that came out later, and it kind of goes over the backstory of some of the characters that are introduced in Kiwami 1, but you're totally fine with starting with 0 as well.
Yeah, and Yakuza is one of those magical games that really sucks you into them. Like, I am pulled into them, and it's like you're living in these games. Just even down to the mundane things you do in this game, like just stopping at a restaurant to eat or going and playing golf or something. Like, there's just so much you can do to live in this game. And very few games pull me in like that to where I just zone out and just I am literally transported into that game I'm playing. But Yakuza is one of those special games that has that ability.
It took me 50 hours to beat Yakuza 5. So, I mean, and I think if I were to have just burned through that solo single-player story, it maybe could have taken me half of that. But, like you said, I got sucked into the world, and, I wanted to see all the new stuff they added as far as the side content, and it never disappoints with that. And I feel like if I'm gonna play one of these games, I have to see it for what it is and do a little of everything just to say I've seen it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. You can find all our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And where else can they find us, Mitch?
Yep, you can find us on our Twitter, which is @TheHillsAreSilent, our Instagram, which is Instagram.com/HillsAreSilent. Our TikTok is @TheHillsAreSilent Podcast. Our YouTube, again, @TheHillsAreSilent. Questions, comments, game recommendations, feedback, anything, give us an email, hillsaresilent@gmail.com. We'll catch you on the next episode.